Welcome to The Baton, a John Williams musical journey. Join host Jeff Commings as he takes you through the career of the illustrious film composer John Williams, starting with his debut in 1959 through more than 100 films in 60 years. Now, here's your host, Jeff Commings.
Hello, so great to have you here for this episode. We're moving to the end of 1969 when the world was talking about almost nothing but the Vietnam War and whether the United States needed to be involved. Charles Manson was on a killing spree, Neil Armstrong had taken one giant leap for mankind on the moon, and the Woodstock concert made hippie rock more mainstream. And in the middle of all this was the musical film Goodbye, Mr. Chips, whose message was to relish the days gone by and keep traditions alive. Because the times were a-changin', it was tough for Goodbye, Mr. Chips to gain popularity around the world. Musicals were still big moneymakers at the box office, but the way they presented themselves often differed from the traditional style of talking, then singing, then talking, then singing, etc. Funny Girl, Barbra Streisand's film debut, was the second highest grossing film of 1968, while the Oscar winner for Best Picture, Oliver, was number 7. But some of the other films in the top 10 that year were decidedly dark and these days viewed as avant-garde. Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey changed the way we look at science fiction. Bullitt revitalized the action movie, and even The Love Bug put a spin on Disney's live-action comedies. By the time Goodbye, Mr. Chips hit theaters in November 1969, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Midnight Cowboy, and Easy Riders were big hits that year. You couldn't get as far on the other end of the spectrum as Goodbye, Mr. Chips with those films. Arthur Jacobs, the man who desperately wanted to put Mr. Chips back on the big screen, had to think outside the box in order to get his film noticed. To his credit, he did just that, but it just didn't catch on. Goodbye, Mr. Chips was originally a celebrated movie from 1939, with Robert Donat winning the Best Actor Oscar for playing a stuffy British schoolteacher who becomes a beloved headmaster. Andre and Dory Previn, the team behind the songs in Valley of the Dolls, saw a re-release of the film in the 1950s and thought it would make a great musical. With MGM's blessing, the Previns set out to write the songs even though no director, producer, or actors were assigned. I'm going to keep the backstory of making this film as brief as I can because we are here to hear music. But it really was an amazing journey to get this film made, and if you want to know about it in great detail, pick up the 3-CD release of the score by Film Score Monthly Classics. Mike Matessino unwinds all the strings that unwove this story, beginning with the idea that the musical should be a reunion between Rex Harrison and Julie Andrews, the original Henry Higgins and Eliza Doolittle from the stage version of My Fair Lady. But after The Sound of Music, Andrews didn't want to do another musical right away. This prompted Harrison to leave the project as well. One of the notable people who expressed interest was Richard Burton, but he was not going to sign a contract until he heard all the songs. So, Previn recorded his score in October '66 to please Burton, but by then Burton had decided to move on to other projects with his wife, Elizabeth Taylor. One of those films turned out to be Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Since no one was 100% eager to act in the film, the production kept getting delayed. This meant Andre Previn had to bow out of the movie around winter 1967 to take on other work, and he took his score with him. To this day, I have not seen any indication that Previn's work for Goodbye, Mr. Chips has been released publicly. And after his death earlier this year, I don't know if that means the likelihood of hearing those songs is good or bad. Previn's departure brought in Leslie Bricusse, who had just finished working with Jacobs on more than a dozen songs for Dr. Dolittle. Bricusse was working on a musical version of the Sherlock Holmes story for the stage, but put it off to write more than a dozen songs for Goodbye, Mr. Chips. Previn's last decision before he officially removed himself from Goodbye, Mr. Chips was to ask John Williams to serve as musical director. Williams, who was working in Germany on the score to Heidi, was quick to say yes. Williams and Bricusse already had a great working relationship, and certainly Williams was not going to say no to what he might have thought to be a surefire hit. The revolving doors of actors going in and out of the project stopped when Peter O'Toole and Petula Clark were cast as Mr. Chips and his wife Catherine. This was a big change for O'Toole, who was coming off rave reviews as Henry II in 1968's The Lion in Winter, which is one of my favorite O'Toole films. O'Toole wasn't known as a singer, and Bricusse wrote the songs for O'Toole to deliver in a sort of song-speak style that Rex Harrison made popular. Petula Clark, on the other hand, was one of the most popular singers of the time thanks to her hit Downtown. Around completely, making him see his stuffy life in vivid colors and opening up his ability to love and in turn give love to his wife and respect the children at the school more. A lot of this is told through the song score, which is mostly performed as voiceover in an effort to not put off those tired of the traditional musical format. As with any musical, the first thing to do is record the songs for playback during filming. Beginning in March 1968, Bricusse spent 2 months writing many songs, with Williams by his side as orchestrator. What Williams is doing at this time is taking the sketch compositions that Bricusse gives him and fills in the gaps with a flute melody here or more strings in another section. This gives Bricusse more time to write the songs. The songs were recorded in London in June 1968, with the first day of shooting on July 16 in the Sherborne School in southern England. During filming, Williams returned to the States and composed the score to Daddy's Gone A-Hunting, which we listened to in the previous episode. Williams also had the time to give the recordings another listen, and he had also heard of other songwriters coming in to submit material as buffer in case Ross and Jacobs felt the songs didn't fit the scenes as filmed. But Williams wrote to director Herbert Ross in the meantime and urged him to stick with Bricusse' score, which helped Ross gain confidence in the music. From February to June 1969, Williams was in charge of the music. Bricusse and most of the rest of the music team moved on to work on Bricusse' next movie musical, Scrooge. Williams was tasked with recording more robust versions of the songs than what was recorded for playback during filming. He also took the time to write the underscore for several scenes that did not have songs and made changes as he went along based on Bricusse' notes. I think this was a crucial time for John Williams because he was very focused on taking Bricusse' music and coloring in some spaces. That gave him an even bigger understanding of the importance of orchestration, knowledge that would continue to grow and help make him the success he is today. Many of the people who have worked on his films as orchestrators often say there isn't much for them to do because the quote-unquote sketch scores that Williams hands them are often so detailed that he's pretty much done their job. Surely his work on this film, as well as Valley of the Dolls and the upcoming Fiddler on the Roof, played a bigger role in creating this genius of a man than we give credit. According to the liner notes for the Film Score Monthly Classic CD, John Williams wrote a lot of underscore music, but I only clocked about 7 minutes of it in the film. This does not include the overture, entr'acte, or exit music. There is no indication why the score was severely chopped from the film, but I'll play some of it on this episode and you can make your own opinion about it. It's likely that the filmmakers wanted the music in the film to come mostly from the songs in order to keep the focus on Bricusse and not Williams. I've never viewed Bricusse as a great songwriter. He does well with lyrics, but his song melodies are often lacking. If not for Williams, I think the song score for Goodbye Mr. Chips might have suffered greatly from blandness. One of the songs that benefited greatly from Williams was And the Sky Smiled, sung by Petula Clark as Catherine while Mr. Chips and Catherine are touring the ruins of Pompeii. At this moment, Catherine is falling in love with Chips, and the song describes a moment when her outlook on life changed from a depressed musical theater star.
A million planets were swimming in the sky. I only saw the sun. A million faces drifted by. Suddenly there was one, filling my mind like the day was filled with sun, telling my heart my life had just begun. Although it is so many years away, I remember that moment as though it were yesterday. He smiled, I smiled, we smiled, and the sky smiled too. We walked, he talked, I talked, and the sky
The instrumentation during the song is noteworthy, but it's the instrumental bridge that is the real gem of the song. Notice the typical Williams touches, especially in the strings.
It was
Just before that song, we get the first underscore moment in the film, which isn't until the 34-minute mark. The sound level of this bit of music is so low in the final mix that you can barely hear, but you'll really get to dissect it here. I especially like the use of the harp, which will be an instrument used throughout the film to denote the love between Chips and Catherine. At the end of the day touring the ruins, Catherine has a sense that she and Chips are meant to be together. But she asks the god Apollo if it will happen. As she offers up her silent question to the heavens, Williams puts in a synthesized harpsichord along with the flute. Only 2 songs are performed in their entirety by the characters on screen. The first is When I Am Older, which starts off with low trombones and bass accompanying the kids returning to the boredom of school after a long break. The kids sing about boring classes and missing mother's cooking.
Home, sweet home are over.
They're over.
7 weeks of mother's cooking,
Mother's love
and mother's looking after,
and laughter.
And living in clover.
are over.
Moreover, 14 weeks of Michaelmas time stretch endlessly ahead.
14 weeks of nameless horror wait to be unfurled.
14 weeks of Latin verbs, I wish that I were dead.
14 weeks of school cap tipping, filthy food and Mr. Chipping.
14 weeks in the dungeon of a schoolboy's
The music turns 180 degrees and picks up when the children think of what they will do when they are old enough to not go to school anymore.
When I am older,
I'll be the president of Peru.
I'll own an emerald mine or two.
I'll swim for England in the next Olympic
When I am older, I'm going to be a playboy farmer.
I'm going to be a lady charmer.
I'm gonna be a knight in armor.
Find a damsel and disarm her.
When I am older,
I'll be the multi-S millionaire.
I'll be the fellow beyond compare.
I'll be the hero not the popular so glad.
I'm going to carve the world in pieces.
I'm going to be as rich as Croesus.
Think of the mighty empire I shall
When I am older, wiser and bolder.
On the day that I get out of school,
I'm going to be a fine musician.
I'm gonna be a rich physician.
I'm going to be a politician.
I shall be an obstetrician. I'll achieve my great ambition.
When I'm older, I'll be who makes the rule. I will abolish public school. I'll be chairman of at least 100 boys.
The song feels ripped from Oliver in its tone, but I suppose any British song featuring children at the time will sound the same. I do like the orchestrations throughout this, and while we shouldn't completely rule out Bricusse's ability to know which instrumentation will best fit his songs, we get lots and lots of Williams flourishes here. Catherine and Chips meet again at a party Catherine is throwing at her home in London. This is where we see the funny and fabulous Sian Phillips as Ursula, eating up the scenery and loving every minute of it. I really wish Ursula got a song moment in the film, but with the filmmakers wishing to keep most of the song performances in voiceover, that wasn't going to happen. Phillips, by the way, was O'Toole's wife at the time, and if you didn't know that, I urge you to watch the film again and see the scenes between her and O'Toole in a different way. Catherine and Chips go on a walk along the Thames River after the party with a song called Walk Through the World playing underneath. This song is not the best one that Petula Clark sings, and it's drowned out mostly by the dialogue Catherine and Chips are having on screen, and that was a bad choice.
Walk through the world with me, and you will see how happy life can be, how fresh and new when you're with me, and I'm with you. Right through that sky of gray, let's fly away and find another day to call our own, where we can be in love alone, where we can live the life we dream of living, live the dream of giving all we have to give. Welcoming the day, I will hear you say, aren't you glad to be walking through the world with me?
I will say that the flute in this score is given lots of playing time, and I love it. It keeps the romance light and innocent, which it is, and complements Clark's vocals very well. The second major underscore moment in the film comes just before the intermission, when Catherine runs away after hearing people threatening to tell about her troubled past to tarnish Chips's name at the school. Chips sees Catherine get into a car and leave, and he hops on a bus to follow her. He doesn't get to her, but we still see the bus chugging after Catherine's car into the intermission. Williams wrote music for the scene when Catherine overhears the conversation, but it wasn't used in the final film. Here is part of that unused music. When Catherine runs away, the orchestra goes into full gear when Chips chases her. The melody you'll hear is from a song that has not yet been sung in the film called You and I, but its melody fits better for an upbeat tempo than And the Sky Smiled or Walk Through the World. The final 30 minutes of the film takes a stark turn in mood. It begins with the love song You and I, which was the last song written and recorded for the film. Catherine performs it in full in the film, and it has become the highlight of the movie.
Traveled far together, we've pursued our little star together. We are happy as we are together. We may never get to heaven, but it's heaven at least to try. Till the time we have is gone together. Watch the evening drawing on together. Growing older, growing closer, making memories that light the sky, that only time can make, that only love can make, that only we can make, you and I.
You and I is performed just after Chips threatens to resign from the school after being passed over for the headmaster's job. He doesn't resign, and when the new headmaster is called away for government service, Chips is given the headmaster job. He runs to tell Catherine the great news, but she is heading off to entertain the troops at a nearby base. This is the last official moment of John Williams' underscore in the film. At this point, we have about 25 minutes left in the film, and there will be very little music and only one song near the end. Catherine is killed when a bomb lands at the base where she is performing, and soon after, Chips is informed of her death. The scene when Chips sits at his desk in front of stunned students is a masterclass in acting. While watching the scene, I felt the grief and anguish, and yet I really wanted some music to get that tear that was welling up in my eye to get rolling down my face, as composers are tasked to do. It turns out that Williams did write music for that scene, and it was left unused. But here it is. The scene in which Chips announces his retirement from the school is also touching, but Williams never wrote a note of music for it. I felt like a song needed to be done here, or just a little music as he walks out of the building to the cheers of the students. Believe me, it would have intensified our reaction to O'Toole's performance. I'm not a trained musician, but I really felt just 30 seconds of music there would have made what has become one of O'Toole's most memorable scenes even better. Goodbye, Mr. Chips didn't make a profit, with reviews blasting the plot. Rex Reed called it, quote, square, a term of the time that fit a review of a movie that seemed to go against the current culture. But everyone could not deny how good Peter O'Toole was, giving him his 4th Oscar nomination in 7 years. He lost to John Wayne's performance in True Grit. Also nominated that year for Best Actor was Richard Burton for Anne of the Thousand Days, another project he had been working on as soon as he took his name out of contention for Goodbye, Mr. Chips. The only other Academy Award nomination for the film was for its music score. Bricusse and Williams shared in the nomination in the category Scoring of a Musical Picture. The presentation of the award was, well, interesting, with actress Shawnee Wallace singing the nominations with composer Elmer Bernstein backing her up on vocals and keyboard. I won't play the first minute of that piece, but just go right to the moment John Williams' name is announced.
Now we're here to tell you what the nominations are.
Goodbye, Mr. Chips.
An abject production, Metro Goldwyn Mayer. Leslie Bricusse wrote the songs that Pet and Peter sing. Johnny Williams adapted them and made the whole thing swing.
And after all the other nominees are sung, which takes another 2 minutes, Bernstein named the winner.
The winners are Lenny Hayton and Lionel Newman for Hello, Dolly.
The video is on YouTube, and John Williams is on screen a couple of times seated next to his wife, seemingly enjoying the whole thing, at least until the envelope is opened. As you may know, John Williams was also nominated in the original score category that year for The Reivers, which is also the focus of the next episode. And I don't know if that category was announced before the musical score category or not. But I won't spoil the outcome of that award category if you don't know it. You'll have to come back for next week's episode to see how it turns out. Okay, so this is going to do it for this episode. I really hope you have a greater appreciation now of the work John Williams put into Goodbye, Mr. Chips. In terms of original music, it's definitely not a standout film. But it remains one of his many projects of that time which helped shape him into the maestro that he is today. If you've been following this podcast since the beginning, I think you have heard that evolution come to fruition in the past 3 films he has worked on. It's only going to grow as we close out 1969 and look into the very exciting decade of 1970. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next episode. Until then, the baton is down.